everybody should have done, and let me know if you didn't, is install the fonts. If anybody has any problem installing fonts, I know Jenny did, just let me know, and I can send TTFs of the Avenir Next and the Phosphate. So on slide 7 right now, so really the first thing that you guys should have is open up your blank. I'm going to start screencasting right now. Can you guys, for both Hangouts, can you see my screen?
Yeah. Oh, that's me.
Natalie and Latier, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it, Sandra.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to minimize the Google Hangouts. I just wanted to make sure. So then it looks like everybody's able to see what I'm going to be doing then. So if you have any questions or something's not working for you, definitely don't hesitate to just chime up and even show me what's happening on your computer screen.
I have one question.
Okay.
The file that you sent, mine already looks like this. Hold on one second.
Do you see headphones in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, delete them. You know something, I was, I realized that when I downloaded it from one file to the next. So if everybody can take a look at what my file should look like right here, I think I might have left a couple layers in there. Your file should look like this with 2 black boxes and a white one in the middle. So if you see a set of headphones and a piece of metal, just delete it. So right now, the only things that I have in my folder is, I have a bunch of folders. So I did leave folders in there just so you guys can think about like organizing it in a specific way, but they should be empty. So your stereo, if you're following my mouse, the stereo sonic ad, the logo, the experience of sound, that's all empty. Inside of the right stereo ad folder right here, you should have one triangle or one rectangle. And then inside of the left stereo ad, you have another. And the reason that, and then behind it is the background. This is what you guys are seeing right here. The reason that I put the 2 rectangles in there is because something that I use really often, and I think it's just really useful for a number of different reasons, is clipping masks. So essentially what a clipping mask is going to do is it's going to let you stack a series of things on top of these rectangles and then nest it inside. So you can imagine, like, you know, if you had a big texture and that texture went all the way around, if I nest it inside, it would take the form of the rectangle. So you can imagine that's useful if you want to apply texture to a font, or it lets you take 2 layers and take the top layer and nest it into the bottom layer. So that's what we're kind of working off of for this ad, and I think it's a really useful technique. So if everybody can just delete the metal layer that's in their blank PSD file and delete the stereo, and just leave the 2 black rectangles in the background along with the folders. And then if you skip through, I'm looking on slide 9 right now, and you feel free to follow along in here. I'll reference the numbers just in case you're getting lost, but you don't necessarily have to. The very first thing I want to do is I want to open up the headphone file that I have. So I'm just going to drag my headphone file into Photoshop. In Photoshop, generally speaking, it's going to bring any files that you open it up, it'll bring it on top as little tabs. Now, in Photoshop, you can actually remove these tabs and you can add them back on. And that's useful depending on how your workflow is. You can drag and drop a lot of things between files, so the benefit of moving it means that you can drop it into the next. So you might see me do that a little bit. If for some reason, if your Photoshop work window gets really crazy, you can go to work window, workspace, and then reset, and it'll reset it back to the standard from what you were working on. But just in case, like all of a sudden something moves and you don't know where it is, that's how you fix it. So anyway, open up your headphones file and bring it into Photoshop. This was just something I found off of the internet. Generally speaking, when I look for things and I'm like found objects, you can actually do a setting in Google where if I'm looking for headphones, a lot of times what I do is go to Tools and change your size to large. Because at least then you're going to be getting images that aren't going to be super pixelated that you can work with. This is for student work. If this was for client work, you'd have to be buying images, but definitely try to use the tools and search for large just in general. So that's where I found those headphones from. Come over here to your layer, your tool panel, and you can either hit M, will highlight it, or just click on it. It looks like a little eraser with like starbursts around it. This is a magic eraser tool, and it'll actually, you can see I just did it. It lets you just delete the white. This is really useful. I use this all the time. There's a pro and con. Like this, if you make a mask on something, you can refine it and make it better. But if you want to work fast, this is a really great tool. Do not do this to like people against white, because it's not going to be able to cut out the hair. If you have a, if you're trying to get rid of like a photograph that has a complex background, it's not going to work. It really works when you have a high contrast image, like these headphones, which are essentially black against white. So do what I did right there, is just delete the background of it, and now you have a transparent, the headphones are on top of a transparent image. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm actually just going to drag this off, so that way I can drag and drop. You can also copy and paste too, but I prefer dropping in general. So I'm literally going to grab the headphones that you see right here, and I'm going to drag that into Photoshop. Now, my file is a lot bigger than these headphones, but I think for the purpose of, it still looks good. I mean, like, ideally you'd be looking for even larger headphones, but we can get away with it for purpose of a mock. So hit Command T to resize, and that's going to give you what's called a bounding box. This should be pretty, familiar to you guys. If you hit Shift and hold down Shift, now you can resize it, and the form stays with it. If you don't, and you have a bounding box, it just gets wonky. So if you ever see something that gets skewed, your bounding box might not have been, the size might not have been saved as you were making it bigger or smaller. So hit Shift, and make your headphones about this, a little bit, about the size of the page. And what I want to do is, I want to do that twice. So following here, depending what order that you're doing in, I need to have 2 layers of this. The way that you can duplicate, the way that I generally duplicate is I drag my layer, so I physically grab the layer and I pull it down here to the little layer icon on the bottom, if you see where my mouse is, and now that has given me 2. There's a number of different ways that you can duplicate. Again, you can copy and paste, you can hold down Option and just drag it, and sometimes it'll actually do it too. But the way that I like to do it is I just drag and I duplicate my layer. So now what I want to do is I want to nest each one of these headphones, and I want to put them inside of those triangles, so that way the white is showing in between. So if you arrange both of them, have 2 headphone layers, and put each one on top of one of the black rectangles like I have. Now, this is where you can make a clipping mask. I'm going to show you guys 2 different ways to do it. Command Shift G, let's see. It's funny when you just do things automatically, you don't even think about what the code is for it. So it's Option Command G is going to nest it. So if you see what I just did there, Option Command, I usually like hold on Option first, then hit Command, and then hit G, and that is going to give you your clipping mask. Option Command G, and then you see this little arrow right here. Option Command G, and now what I've essentially done is I have 2 of the stereo headphones. Each one is inside of one of those rectangles. You could totally have put a rectangle on top. That's another way that you can do it. But there's pros and cons. Like if I put a white rectangle on top, my headphones would still be sticking out the other side. So right now what I can do is I can actually move one side without affecting the other side. So the reason that that's kind of nice is this isn't really perfect. Like I want to make sure that my headphones, maybe I'm going to make them a little bit smaller just so it fits in a little bit better. But I want to make sure that they actually fit the purpose of my ad. I'm not really worried too much about if they're the actual width of real headphones, just so that it looks like they are. Are you guys following along right now?
Yes.
Clipping masks are really important. More so is it lets you add something to another layer without needing to create a mask, without needing to cut it out. And it's a really, you can imagine if you were doing something that had a grid format where you're having like maybe 5 or 6 different squares on a page, you can be putting a different image inside of each of those squares without ever needing to cut it out. So I do find that I use them all the time. If for some reason you guys ever forget where you can do a clipping mask, so the other place that you find it is right up here. Hit the menu bar and then come down to create clipping mask, and that's actually going to do the same thing. So if you can't remember if you can't actually remember the shortcut, that's totally a fine way to do it. So I'm going to skip on to let's see. So on slide 14, that's about like where I am right now in the process. I want to do the same thing, and I want to be able to bring the metal texture in. So if you drop the metal texture into your file, obviously I want this behind the headphones. The really nice thing about a clipping mask is now imagine this like a big sandwich. Everything that I put underneath that arrow automatically becomes part of that clipping mask. Now, if you take a look, what just happened is, even though this is all the way over here and it has a lot of space, because I'm putting it underneath on the right hand side, this is all I see. The metal is still here, it's just that I can't see it. So now duplicate the metal texture again, bring it down, that's how you duplicate it, and now drag that and drop it underneath the headphones again, and now you'll see it's being applied to the left hand side. So what's really nice about this is now you can size, like say I didn't like this marking right here and I wanted to hide that, I could be moving that, and you're not worrying about it like accidentally showing from underneath something else. So my headphones accidentally fell out of my clipping mask, so I'm just going to put them back in, and you see the triangle again. Does your guys look about the same?
Yeah.
Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to actually kind of create a little bit of just atmosphere to it. Like, I don't want it to feel quite as static as it is. So the other thing that I use a lot is the brush tool. So if you hit B for brush, or just come over here and hit it, the brush tool, make sure that you have white set. So right now my brush is set to white, right? Like I just did that. The way that, like, I use brushes a lot for the purposes of shadow, for the purposes of, just adding visual interest to, just not to make something so flat. If you come up here, when you have your brush tool selected, you can actually control how big your brush is. Right now my brush is really soft. If I change this, it's going to be really hard, and it's not going to really kind of feel like a brush at all. Something I want to show you guys is Brush Easy. Brushes can be more than just like, I'm physically drawing a line on a paper. You can download a lot of these things for free. I use them for textures a lot of times. So anyway, though, you can actually download and change your brushes in Photoshop if you want to kind of figure out an interesting feel. And Brush Easy is a great place to do that, just for, like I can make brushes that look like watercolor marks, paint splatter. They really have a ton of free brushes out there available, and I do think it's a really good resource when you're just trying to, like, oh, I want my text to be on top of something, but I don't really know what I want it to be on top of. Sometimes I just like look for something, just something that just to see what's out there, and like this looks really cool. And I feel like depending on what the project would be, this could be a really interesting thing that's applied to your background. Obviously, it depends on what you're working on, but there are really a number of really great brushes out there that are available for you guys to use. So right now I want my brush set to very soft, and I want it to be very large. It doesn't really matter what size you are, you just don't want it to be super small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit down, hold on shift, and I'm just going to go across, and that's just the way that you create a straight line. If you see. Now, obviously, if you do that again, it's going to become darker. my brush was probably set, my opacity right here is set to 40. There's two different places that you can play around with the opacity. Your opacity can be applied up here by your brushes, so that means what's coming out of my brush is only 40%. Your opacity could also be, you could just be working in 100% for everything, right? That's really like opaque, and then be changing your opacity right here. So either one works. It's just personal preference. So make, hit shift, go across it, and, kind of just to add a little bit of atmosphere to the composition. And then drag it underneath your headphones, duplicate the layer, and then drag it underneath the other headphones. And just make sure your headphones don't pop out. So what I want to do is, so you should have your clipping mask file should be metal texture, gradient that's, that you've lowered the opacity on, and then headphones. Come up here and hit overlay. This is your blending mode, and it's really useful for a number of things. Like overlay is what I use generally for highlights. I'll change it to that. It just it works really great with light sources. Multiply is what you would use for a shadow. If you guys have ever seen sometimes so imagine you want to put a logo on a shirt. You can hit multiply, and it'll actually, the image that you want to put on the shirt will actually take the form of the wrinkles of the shirt, and it looks like it's part of the material. So multiply is a really useful layer, and definitely play around that with both. Multiply works really well if you, doesn't work so well for lights, but it works better for dark colors, whereas overlay works great for lights. The other one that's really useful is screen. If you've never used screen before, what screen does is it actually gets rid of the black. And so I know that somebody was looking for, Latier was looking for lens flares before, and something that I had suggested that I, kind of just didn't even think about, but with screen, right, I just dropped this in. What screen will actually do is get rid of your blacks, right? So you can imagine, obviously I'm not going to do this for this ad, but that might be appropriate if you wanted to make it look like fires coming out of something or smoke. So if you look for something that has a black background and you apply screen to it, it actually disappears. So blending modes are really useful. Definitely play around with them. Some you use more than others, but overlay, multiply, and screen are the ones I use the most. And if anybody, for some reason, isn't following along or wants to ask a question, just interrupt me. So, right now I am about on, let's see, on slide 19. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in the, this PNG of a wave, like a kind of a sound wave that I had found. So I want two of those. Before I nest it, I'm just going to duplicate it so that way I don't throw off my what I'm nesting. Bring your sound wave and put it underneath your headphones and above the gradient. And make sure that, obviously you're only going to see it if you're on the right-hand side. Make sure that it's visible where you're putting it. So right now, this is my left side and this is my right side. And you can play, now because these are not connected, you can play with how high they are depending on your liking. You can also make them a little bit smaller and thinner if you wanted to. Anyway, because I want this, the reason that they're there is I wanted this to be an ad for a fake ad for what look like headphones. So obviously sound waves kind of, are a graphic element that makes sense. Now, I don't know if any of you guys actually have, let's see if this opens. No, it doesn't, never mind. Sometimes right here, if you see this icon, I'm going to go through this later on, but this is called a smart object. Smart objects are something that are really, it's a good workflow to have because I never make anything flat in my Photoshop files because you never know when somebody says, hey, this headline's changed or this is the wrong logo. So if you make your file, if you make things flat, sometimes you can get yourself in trouble. So I'm gonna kind of speak to why smart objects are really important later on. So drag your wave, your your sound wave files in. So right now your folder should look like headphones, sound wave, gradient where the opacity is lowered, and it's applied to overlay, the metal texture, and everything is going inside of one of the rectangles. So on slide 20, what I want to do is I'm bringing in the texture again. You didn't, necessarily have to do this, but what's nice about doing this is when I apply the dark layer to the sound wave, it's not going to look like I just applied a shadow to the background. There's something kind of nice about it not being perfect. So I wanted to have my sound waves obviously have the texture that's there, but I didn't want it to look like it was just an extension of the background per se. So duplicate the metal texture. This is probably going to throw out my clipping mask, and then bring it on top of, so that way it's kind of stacked. Let's see. Okay, that's right. So just if for some reason it's not covering your sound waves, just make sure that the metal texture on the right-hand side is literally, that's in the right-hand folder, is literally on the right-hand side of your page, and the metal texture that's in the left stereo ad folder is on the left side. So what's interesting here is right now it's just covering up my sound wave. It's actually not doing anything to the sound wave file because everything is being nested. Everything that's happening right here is happening to the rectangle. So I want to make this texture be applied to the sound wave. So the way to do that is actually to create a mask. So how you create one way to create a mask is you highlight something and then you create the mask around what it is that you've highlighted. Like for example, if I wanted to highlight, so I want something to be a mask that's in the shape of a square. And you don't have to follow this along, but I'm just, kind of talking for, kind of the principle of it. So I've just made a marquee of a square. And I'm going to come down here. This is the mask icon. I'm going to hit that. And now, let me just take this out of the clipping mask. I've made a square. So what's really nice about a mask is the reason why you would do something like this is now a mask you can edit. Where the headphones, I've never actually, I can't put the white back. The white is just there. But with a mask, I can actually come in, I can change things. It is a really useful thing when you want to not work in a linear fashion. Like it's not always, because in design it's not always going from point A to point B, from point A to point Z. Like sometimes it's going back and forth a little bit. So using a mask is a good way to make changes that are not permanent, so to speak. So let me just delete that. So right now I have my, now I'm going to get back to where I was in the part of the lecture. I have in each one of my folders, the right stereo ad and then the left stereo ad, I have a headphone, a metal texture, a sound wave file, the brush mark that has a lower gradient and the overlay applied to it, and then a metal texture again that's covering up the background. So the way to turn the metal texture into a mask is go to your sound wave file, either do it on your the right folder or the left folder. It's up to you where you want to start. Hover over top of the little icon that's here and command click on it. Does that make sense? I'm gonna do it again. I'm holding down command and then I'm literally clicking on the icon. I'm not double clicking on it that I just did. I'm just clicking on the icon, and what you can see right now is I've highlighted the sound wave file that is in the right hand folder. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm going to come back to my metal texture in the right hand side. Obviously don't do this to the left just yet. And then come down here and then hit mask. Right now I've applied the metal texture is taking the form of that sound wave file that's below it. It's essentially, now it's the same shape. If you wanted to, you can actually delete the sound wave file. You don't need it anymore. So if you're seeing a little bit of blue, you can actually just turn it off. You don't need this file. The purpose of it was just kind of figuring out where I wanted to like lay out this texture. Now the reason that I did that, and just instead of, like I said, instead of just making it a dark, a dark shape on top of it, is if you zoom in and you just take a look, there's something kind of nice about, it's not really perfect. It's not like, I see this mark right here. It's not this, it's not going from the, it's not the same that's in the background. And I think that's a really nice detail that, it's really minor, but I do think it's quite nice. I think it's, if this was actually just a dark shadow on top of the background, it would actually feel a bit flatter, in my opinion. So it's a really subtle thing, but I do think it's a nice thing to think about when you're thinking about, just subtle things that you can do to make things feel more premium. So let's do the same thing on the left stereo ad. Come down to the sound wave file, hit like I'm going to hit and hold Command, and then just click on the image of the layer. So Command and click. Now that's highlighted the left-hand side sound wave file. And I'm going to come back up to my metal texture and then do the same thing again. So right now what's selected is the sound wave file, and that's highlighted. But now I'm changing my layer. So I'm highlighting the metal texture layer. I'm coming down, if you're following my mouse, and I am hitting the mask button. So now I have a mask of that. And now go ahead and just turn off the blue sound wave, just so we don't get that little bit of a halo. And this is really nice. It's, again, like it's the same texture, but it's subtle. It's not just this. It's not mimicking the background exactly. So you have these like nice little divides right here, and these lines are just kind of breaking. So it's a really nice kind of technique that you can do. I've seen this done in using even frames where you can take the same picture and put it inside of a frame, and it's just like off by a little bit, and it's really nice. But I can show that later on. Okay, the next thing, so if I'm moving on to slide 21, what I want to do is I want to make now a new layer. So come to your metal texture layer, do it on either the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and come down and hit the layer icon button that's down here. And we used this before to duplicate something. Now we're going to use it to make a new layer. And a lot of you guys are probably already familiar with that. So the reason I want to be on the metal texture layer is this should actually make a new layer right on top of it, which is what I want. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Command A, and now that what you've seen is I've just marqueed the entire shape. I could have made a smaller box. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to make a mask around it. So Command A is just nice and easy. Now, right now my swatches are set to white. You can just toggle between the two, but the shortcut for that is if you hit D, it automatically brings you back to black and white. And what's useful is, imagine if I was doing something and I had these like kind of crazy funky colors, but say I have to work really fast. I'm on a timeline. I have a million things I have to hand off to somebody in 15 minutes. If you just hit D, it actually just automatically resets it to black and white. So it's just a nice thing to kind of know. So have your swatches be on black, and come to your keyboard, hit Option, hold it down, and hit Delete. What you should have done is actually filled in, you're actually filling in the entire shape of your ad. You're only seeing the left-hand side because it's nested inside of the left-hand rectangle that you guys have. So hit Command D just to unselect. Come down over here to your metal texture. One of the nice things is once you make a mask, if I know that I want to use it again and again, like I want to do a bunch of stuff to this sound wave file, right? Just hit Option, click on your mask, and drag it to the next layer. And you can see right now, before I let go, my next layer is actually highlighted. I drop it there, and I've just applied that layer to, that mask to the black layer. That's really useful if you're just trying to work fast and you want to use the same mask again and again. So come back up to your blending modes. Multiply is really nice. And I'm going to show you I'm not sure exactly how much you'll see a difference of this, but this is on multiply. If it was normal, it's about the same actually. Where you see, are you guys all familiar with multiply as a blending mode?
I am.
If you guys aren't, let me just show you really fast. This is why multiply can be a really useful thing. Does everybody else know it, or is it worth for me just to show it really fast?
You can show it really
I'm
fast
not familiar.
Okay.
and the definitions for them.
Okay, so so imagine, let's do blank t-shirt. And you don't have to follow along with this, but just watch what I'm going to do really fast. Okay, I'm not going to use that. That's really blurry. This is a little bit bigger. Actually, let me do it on this. I'm sorry. Okay. So this has, you know, quite a defined texture. Like a t-shirt, even a white t-shirt's going to have a texture because it's going to have shading. It's going to have, you know, wrinkles in it that are all slightly different versions of of white, but they do make a texture. So if you want to put, like, say I wanted to put a logo on this, now, the one thing with multiply is it will make things look darker because it's the nature of how multiply works. But so say I wanted to put this logo on top of here. Right now, like, sure, I could go through and I could cut it, but it looks like it's sitting on top of there. It doesn't really look realistic. This is what multiply is going to do to it. It automatically makes it look like it's part of the same thing. So obviously for this, you'd have to maneuver with, like, kind of boosting your yellows a little bit. But you can imagine on top of a white t-shirt, if you were to put something like this, it's going to actually look like it's taking the form of the t-shirt. So I think it's just something that's really nice that lets you take the layer underneath and the layer on top and merge it to one. So if you ever sometimes see, like, on the subway where you'll see, like, an ad that looks like it's somebody has put a logo on top of, like, one of those, like, little Christmas tags or something where it's like it has that cardboard texture coming through, they're probably using multiply. It's a really useful tool. And if I want to have something have a shadow, generally speaking, I always just set it to multiply, just so it's a little bit it's working with the layer below it as opposed to just sitting on top of it. So I think that's kind of like really how it works. So you can imagine if this was to be a t-shirt, you know, and there's a lot of wrinkles happening in this shirt. It's not just a flat thing. You know, that's already feeling way more realistic than, see how it's like, it's taking those wrinkles into account. So that's what multiply is doing. The reason that I'm doing it here is, it's just, again, it's like it's out of habit, but I just feel like it's taking into account what's underneath it. So so to go back to this right now, what you guys should have done is you should have a mask layer on top of your black, if everybody's following along with me. So let's do that again. I'm going to go to my right stereo ad. I hit the new new layer button. It gives me a blank layer between my headphones and my metal texture. I hit Command A to select everything because I know I'm going to mask it off. It doesn't matter. I hit Option. I hold it down. I hit Option Delete to fill it in black. I knew it was going to fill in black because I have my black selected. Again, if I had pink or red, it would fill it in that color. So hit Command D just to deselect what you have. And obviously I don't want my square to be black, but I do want it to have, you know, I want to make those sound wave files more noticeable. Come down to your metal texture where I already have that mask that I made. Hit Option, hold down Option, click on your mask and drag it. Now this has been applied to my next layer. Come back up here to multiply and just lower your opacity. And there's really no science here. I might have given you guys an opacity setting that's in there, but you can really do it to what your taste is. This side right here is already a bit darker, so I don't know if I would maybe I'll even go a little bit less. But already, like, it like, to me, feels pretty nice. So in the presentation deck, I am going to skip over to, because we've already done this. Let's go. I'm going to be on slide 26. What I want to do is I want to type in, so hit the T button. Sometimes, and this is something I want to call out because I've seen this on some of your guys' Photoshop files that you send. You can come over here and hit T, or just hit the T. T shortcut is for text. If I just click on the page, it automatically gives me something I can type in. Don't do that because you don't have a. If I go to, there's no bounding box that is part of it's. Sure, you can resize it, but instead of doing that, come over here, hit T, and actually make a box. And I think it's just a better way to work than hitting T and not actually having a box for it. So the first thing, type in no caps. Experience and change this to playlist script. And this is just, a really nice, pretty looking brush font. This was probably handmade by somebody. And then hit T again and make another box and type in sound. And I want to change this because right now, and here's my rationale for changing it on a design. I think that there's something about hierarchy in text. I didn't have to do a script font and a big bold font. It could have been like a thin font and a thick font. But there is something nice about having a little bit of, of applying hierarchy to your text. Like bold against thin always just looks good. And that's because of hierarchy. So select sound and then change this to phosphate. It might bring you up phosphate inline. Change that to solid. And what I'm just going to do now is if you hit Command T, just resize it so that way it feels appropriate to experience stuff. And one thing I want to call out, because I've seen this again, I've corrected a lot of people with this. If you're actually typing something, if you're typing something, a lot of times in Photoshop, if you come up to your characters, right now my font is set at 80 points, and right to the immediate right of this is it affects essentially what you're letting. Letting is the space in between two lines of copy. And auto is really a large space. I'd never keep it to auto unless I wanted something to maybe be editorial. And really, I would imagine, and I feel like I'm not a typographer, but probably auto is a certain size setting that was preferred for editorial, for books, is what I would imagine. I'm not 100% sure of, but it is a really large gap. And it's actually, if this was to be my headline, it would be kind of a bit of a distracting gap. So something I like to do is I actually like to, so hit T to get back into your text. And my rule of thumb, and sometimes I even go tighter than this, is I always make this space the same exact size as my headline. So this is already looking nicer. There's sometimes certain situations that I might even make it tighter, like if I have a really big font and the space just feels really large. But my rule of thumb is I always, for a headline, make the space in between lines be the same size as my font. And it already feels way more pleasing than something that is really large for a headline. I think if you were doing something, if you see between the two, this is already more pleasing for a headline than this. This just feels really large. So if you were doing editorial for a magazine, auto is fine, but for any kind of design work, I would make it a lot smaller. Again, my rule of thumb is just have it match the size of your text. So right now what I want to do, and I think this is a really cool thing that you can do, that you guys could be thinking about to do to your fonts in general. Obviously there's a time and place to apply a texture to a font. Sometimes it can be good, and sometimes it just, it's not. Take your sound and experience the sound and drop it into the experience the sound folder. So if you want to close the right and left stereo right now, I'm a huge fan of folder organization. It makes my life easier when I need to find something. I'm also a big fan of having auto select to my layer on too. I like that. Some people don't like it, but as I'm kind of clicking through, if my auto select layer's on and I want to find my headphones, I can just click on the headphones and I know which folder they're in. So drop your 2 lines of copy, experience the sound, into the experience the sound folder. And you can close it. You don't need it open once you've had it. Bring in your metal texture again and just drop it on top. Now, what's really cool about nesting is you've seen me now nest inside of a square, but I can actually nest inside of a clipping mask. I always refer to it as nesting. I feel like it's pretty appropriate. But what's really cool about making a clipping mask is you can actually apply it to a whole folder. So hit Option Command G, or the other place to go is come up here to your little hamburger icon and scroll down to Create Clipping Mask is the other way to do it. And I've already added now cool texture to this. Right now, this is feeling a little bit hard to read, so I might play around with making it bigger, so that way the texture isn't quite as in my face. Like I think it depends what size it is. But that's already kind of like feeling pretty cool. Something that you can do is if it's for some reason feeling like it's a little bit hard to read, the other thing that you can do is actually just make a square. This could be a rectangle. You could use the rectangle button for it. And I'm going to make a square. I'm going to make a new layer. And I don't want it to make it black. I want to make it white. So I hit D. Is going to bring me back to black, but just toggle to white. Now I hit Option D just to fill in that square, and I'm going to nest that as well. So create clipping mask, come down to overlay, and then lower my opacity. If you want to make it even feel like it's less obvious. But that's up to you guys. It just depends like how much of your texture is showing. It also depends on how. The other thing that you can do too is, if it's a little bit hard to see, is possibly your texture, the metal texture that's in the left-hand side. If you hit drag it so that way there's different size. That texture is a little bit darker on the upper left-hand side. That'll even give you more contrast between your font and your the background. So did everybody follow that? Like the clipping mask you can use inside of a folder. You can apply it to an entire folder. If I wanted to, like I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to put everything inside of a folder. Right? Like, you don't have to follow along for this, but, imagine like I wanted to, I don't know why I would do this, but I'm just showing like I can actually now, this is nested inside of even a larger folder. So this is taking the shape of a folder, and there's folders within folders. So use clipping masks as a really quick way. I didn't have to cut out that texture to fit the font. I was able to just put it inside of that. So when we were doing like the most interesting man stuff, if you take a look at some of that work that I did, not all the time, but sometimes some of the font had a very slight gold texture to it. That was just done with a clipping mask, and I put the gold texture inside of what I typed. So I do think it's a really nice, useful thing when you're thinking about design, where it feels appropriate and when you can do it. But clipping masks in general are really useful. I'm going to skip over to, I'm getting to the point that I'm just going to drop my smart ad in. So come over here to your smart logo and drop it in. Resize it, hit shift to make it smaller or bigger depending on how big it is when you drop it into your file. And I want to put this into the the smart ad, just for and this is just for organizational purposes. This isn't changing the way that my ad is looking. I'm going to come over here and I want to add my car in there. So same thing, I'm going to resize it, hit shift as you're resizing to keep the size. And then my little car is parking between these headphones. It's pretty funny. So I just want to call out, like this car, what I did with this car is not what you would want to use the magic eraser for. Like there's too much shadow going on. I would probably do that by hand, quite honestly. Or, you know, use channels to do it, and I can show you guys how to do that later on too. So I put my little car in there, come back, I hit T again, I want to use my type tool, and I'm just going to type in park anywhere. I don't know if I spelled that right. Now, if you don't see what you just typed, it's because your font is too big. So make your font smaller, and then change it to Avenir next, condensed. And you could have picked any font that you want. The reason I chose that font is I wanted it to feel different than the fake ad. I wanted it to feel separate. So right now, I typed in park anywhere. Something useful in the character channel box, if you guys are looking, if you don't have it open, go to Window and hit Character. That's going to open up this right here. I also like to have paragraphs open, but you can actually automatically make things capitalized. This right here is really useful. This is going to make something bolded, so if you don't have a bold font, it adds a little bit of a, you know, thickness to your font. This is going to make your font italic. This is going to make your font all caps, which is what I want. This is going to make your font small caps. The reason you don't see it is because I didn't use any capitals to begin with. But if I wanted to, it would make my font look like it's a small cap. And small cap is when you have a larger capital letter and then smaller ones, as opposed to lowercase. And it's not a true small cap, but it, you know, it does a good job of like creating one for you when you want to do that. So what I want to do is I want to just use all capitals, just because it's clean and it complements anything. I think like just in general, I had taken a typography class a long time ago at SVA. Something that someone had told me once, and I think it's true, is if you want to mix fonts, you know, I feel like there's definitely an art for choosing fonts that work together. You can like look online to see why certain fonts look together, but try to use all capitals if you're going to be using something as crazy as like a script font against something that's not. Just because all capitals are, it's like more pleasing to the eye than lowercase. Lowercase, the purpose of lowercase is the way that your eyes work. Is your eyes, if you're reading a book and the type is small, lowercase actually helps your eye identify what it is that you're reading, so it's easier to read. If you were to read a novel and it was all capital letters, it would be actually really strenuous on your eye. It would be hard. But for a purpose of a headline, I can still read sound and park anywhere, you know, just fine. So I just think in general, if you're going to be using, you know, try to use all caps, you know, use it smartly. Sometimes certain things, you know, don't call for it, but if you do want to pair fonts together, all caps is kind of like the black dress of fonts. And you can just do this by eye. If you wanted to, you know, get it perfect, come up to paragraph, center align it. And if you wanted to also make it perfect, right now, I don't actually have a box for this white, right? This white is just the background. If I wanted to make it perfect, something that you can do is open up your right and your left folders. I can select, if you hit Command, I'm going to hit my rectangle, and now I've just selected my right-hand rectangle. I hit Command again, and I select my left-hand. Let's see, hold on. That's not doing it. Okay. So hit Command, you can select your right-hand rectangle, and then holding down Command, hit Shift, then you can also select your left-hand rectangle. So if you take a look, there's a line here and a line here. What I've selected is I've selected this shape, and then I've selected this shape. So I've selected everything except for the white. Come up here and hit Select Inverse. Now my white is selected. You can actually see the line going right here and right here. And the reason that I wanted to do that, just for the purpose to show you guys, is if you wanted to align things like perfectly, go to your Park Anywhere. If you have something highlighted, you can actually go to your Align tool. Oh, it's right up here. So you can go to your Align tool, and you can now hit it, and it's going to align whatever you want in relationship to what you have highlighted. So what I have highlighted right here is my white box, and now if I hit this up here, I've literally, center aligned my text perfectly to that. Now I can do the same thing for my smart logo. I come and click on my smart logo. I hit the alignment, and it was actually pretty good. And the same thing with my car. And the car might not actually need to be moved too much, just because it might be. You know, I feel like the car is one of those things you probably would want to do by eye, just because you don't want the shadow to actually like affect where the car is put. So anyway, like just to, you know, kind of not beat a dead horse, if you have something highlighted, you can actually you can align things based on what you have highlighted. Okay, so then the last thing I want to do for this ad before we put it inside of a mock-up is I want to drop in the logo for the fake ad that I made. So open up in Photoshop. This is actually a PSD. And I want you guys to do something. This isn't part of the like what I had given through the presentation, but I think it's like a useful tool. So if you're in the PSD right now, Stereosonic logo that I have, double click right here. This is what's called a smart object. And the reason that you would do a smart object, if you double click, now if you take a look, I have my sample ad, I have the PSD of the smart object, and then it opens up another file that says Stereosonic logo PSB. A smart object is something where you can organize your file in a way that like one layer actually houses many layers, but I don't see it until I double click on it. So it's a really smart way of organizing what you're doing. So essentially, it looks like you're flattening it, but you're not flattening it. So that way, if somebody ever comes back to you and says, hey, this isn't working, can you change it? You don't have to start from scratch. So if everybody could just double click on the smart object, you should open up a new layer, and let me know if somebody doesn't see that. But right now, you can see the logo that so I just made that up, Stereosonic. It's not a real brand. Change that logo to something else. It doesn't matter to me. You can call it Best Headphones Ever. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually change it for the purpose of this presentation. I'm going to call it Bose Sound. And once you're done, just type in whatever you want it to be. It really doesn't matter to me, but I just want to show you this. So when you're done with it, if you take a look before I hit save, my Stereosonic PSD that I opened still says Stereosonic. The reason is I haven't saved anything yet. I'm going to hit save, and now I go back to my original folder of the PSD, and it's been updated. So I'm going to take this new logo that I've just saved, and let me know if you guys are all following along with me. I'm going to drop it into my folder, and I'm actually going to put it inside of the Sonic logo folder that I have right there. So I'm going to close everything. Right now, my organizational structure is I organized it by the Stereosonic fake ad that I made, right? And then underneath that is my smart ad. Just so, because I'm working with playing around that there's two different ads. Inside the Stereosonic ad, there is my left-hand side, my right-hand side, experience the sound, and then I have Stereosonic logo right here. So obviously, that's not where I want it to go. I hit Command T and just move it somewhere on the end. It doesn't matter where it is. So now this is called Bose Sound. And all of a sudden, you know, imagine if this is the real world. I showed this to my creative director. My creative director's like, I love it. This is the best thing ever. Obviously, I'm exaggerating here. But then they come back and they said, oh no, you know, the client actually decided that they don't want to, they don't, this is a great ad, but they're not going to use it for the Bose sound. They want to use it for the Bose sound too. Can you change that? Yes, I can, because this is a smart object. So right now, if you take a look, what's in here is I literally dragged and dropped my smart object. So it looks flat, right? It just looks like a normal layer. I'm actually going to close this for the time being. So if you close, just close your old layer, close the Stereosonic PSD that you guys have, just because I want to show you this again for repetition. So just keep your sample ad blank open. So right now I have this like logo that I put in here. I'm going to double click on it. Now it opens up my Bose sound, and this is going to be for the 2. So I hit my type tool. I come over here and I hit 2 because that's what it is. Maybe we're even going to make this solid just so it stands out. Right now my sample ad still Bose sound, the original one. I'm going to hit save my PS on what I opened up, which is PSB. And now this has been updated. So again, smart objects are a really useful way of organizing where you can go back and change things. If this was a flat thing, I'd have to, try to figure out what size it was or maybe remake it. So you can imagine how useful this is down the line, that you can actually go back and edit something. Somebody says, you turn this into Nancy, and she's like, I hate this headline. It needs to be a different headline. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with this smart object. So it's something that, like, learn it. It's something that I use all the time, and it's something that saved my ass a lot. So my ad's done. Like, my flat ad is done. But, I want to present it in my book. I want it to look really good. And even though people see this, they're going to see, okay, this is a print spread, but I can make it better. So go back to your files that I gave you guys. Does everyone have... Is it not in there? Do you guys have in your assets the mock or no? Are you guys there?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. I think that maybe if everybody has access to the internet, let me send you this really fast. Do you guys have the mock, or maybe I just didn't? Oh, here it is. Maybe I just didn't download it. So open up your PSD for the photorealistic magazine mock-up that I sent through. This I just found on the internet. I literally Googled magazine mock-up free because I didn't want to pay for one. So what you see is if you open it up, again, these are smart objects. So you see your left, right, your left page, your right page, and then your page 2. I actually put that page 2 in just so you guys had something so we didn't have to worry about it. Double click on your left page. That gives you the left side of the magazine. Go back to your sample ad, hit Command A to select everything. Hit Command Shift Copy. What Command Shift Copy does is it copies your entire everything that's on your page. So Command A, Command Shift Copy, and come back to your color fill 1 PSB smart object, and then hit Command V, and that should paste it in. It's obviously not the right size, so you just need to resize this by eye. Hit Shift, hold it down, and you know that it's going to have to be on the left-hand side. So just do it by eye, and then hit Save. And then you go back to your mock, and you can actually see that this is that this has been updated. So double click on your right page. Go back to your ad. This you probably actually already have this. Command A, Command Shift Copy is probably already still copied because we just did that. And then hit Command V, paste it in, and then resize this to the size of your page. Hit Command S to save it, and now my magazine has been updated. And that's it. Like, I feel like this is already, a lot of times if you see when people put things in their book, they'll use mock-ups they'll use mock-ups like this, and they probably would also show it flat as well. So I think that this is like a nice way to present your work. Does anybody have any questions? Before I let you guys go, so what I want everybody to do is, you guys should have been all following along. Just upload upload the JPEG of this final project. Everybody should have, don't copy me with Bose Sound 2, just name it whatever you want. I just want to make sure that like just the process of it is getting familiar for everybody. Just share your JPEG in that folder. And one more thing I want to do before I let you guys go, Caroline and I will give you guys feedback via email on your sketches for your homework, as opposed to trying to do it via a group group call together. Make sure that if we can't understand, just because of it's a drawing, make sure that you are make sure that you guys at least write out like what you're thinking in the sketches in case it's not apparent. Some people can draw a stick figure, but like I wouldn't know that the stick figure was meant to be smiling, kind of thing. So just be clear what it is that you want us to look at. There's something I want to share before you guys go.
Hey, Cassandra.
Yeah.
Hey, so I fell behind around the time that you were adding the sound waves. So can I hand it in later when I catch up through the presentation?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great.
And reach out if you have any questions about again, I'm not grading you guys based on design. Some of these principles I think are important, and
I just wanted to make sure because that I was watching you do it because I was trying to go back and forth.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
So I'll go through the presentation and do it.
Okay.
I just didn't want to fall behind too far.
No, that's fine. And I actually recorded my screen, so I'd be happy to share the screen recording with you guys. There's one thing I want to just show you before I let everybody go tonight, is in that week 3, on slide 90, I did put a ton of assets that I think are really useful for when you're designing things out. Brush Easy, I just spoke to, that's where you can actually get different brushes. I use it all the time if I want just to add some sort of texture to something. So even if I want something to look black, but I want it just to have like some sort of like something on top of it, I might find a brush that I can just like put it, an ever so slight, color difference just to add a bit of texture to it. I want to, if, Lost Type, I think this is such a great site where you can actually donate what you want. These fonts are really super premium. I think that they look great. If you go to the different fonts, like, these are whole font families. Don't feel bad that, you're not donating, anything to it. Like, because sometimes it's like, I don't know that I want to even use it. So I literally put 0 for a lot of things. I think it's different if you're a brand or you're trying to get it for a commercial use, but for student portfolio, you shouldn't feel that bad about it at all. But these are really great premium fonts that I've actually seen used by brands. It was funny. I was working on something for Klondike, and the Klondike font that they use is Cubano. Klondike, and you'll actually see this Klondike ice cream bars. So this is a brand using this. This is Cubano right here, and they're using this on their site. So these are super premium fonts. The Mission font right here is what's being used by Cotton. So these are great fonts when you're trying to find something to express, especially in a headline. Definitely take a look at there, and just even download them to your computer so you have options for when you do want to go back and do something. I think it's way more premium than DaFont. DaFont's a great resource, but it's not the most premium fonts. League of Movable Type. This is another great resource. I've shared this. Like Ostrich Sands is a great font. League Gothic, I've seen this used a million times. This is just a beautiful font. Like, the reason you might want to use it condensed is it, depending, like, sometimes it looks good against other fonts. You can get a lot of information in a small space. This is a really great resource that you guys should just be downloading and installing these in your computer. These are all free. there's something. Let's see. Brands of the world. Sometimes if you want to find a brand logo for something and you want it to be a vector, the reason that you might want to have a vector brand logo is it won't be blurry, right? Like I can make it any size I want. Brands of the World is a great resource for that. You can actually download Illustrator files of a lot of different brand logos, like say Mars. Or And these are things that people have actually uploaded. So here's the IMS font. And then if I was to download this wouldn't just be a JPEG or a PNG. This would be an Illustrator file. So I do think that this is a really good resource if you're trying to make student work and you can't find a logo that works for you or it's just too blurry. I use that a lot. The Noun Project. Is anybody here familiar with Noun Project? Noun Project is another really great resource. You just log in, make a Facebook account for anything that you want. But these are actually, you can download these these are free. If you download them as a CFG, this is an Illustrator file. The benefit of doing that is you can make it any size you want. But these are actually just really great resources that could add a little bit of a design element to some of your work. And, these are also cheap to buy, but for student work, you can download these for free. This is a really great website as well. Like, you don't need to design out all of your icons by hand if you don't want to. Google Fonts, this is another one that's also really good. I mean, like, that's something that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. These few that are right here, Adobe Colors CC, this is just, there's a handful of different websites that I had put up here for this. This is like, so say you want to make an ad, but you want to figure out what your color palette could be. You can actually use these kind of sites, and there's a few of them just to help you select colors that go together. And I think it's a nice thing when you're like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Let me see just kind of, color theory gives me here. So I think that that's a really nice resource. I also wanted to call out, Brush Easy is one that I wanted to put on there. I mean, like Upwork and Fiverr, I think it'd be more so for outsourcing something. Like, say you want to have somebody, help make illustrations for you. Those are generally pretty affordable things that you could be doing. And I think that's probably about it for right now that I can think of. PSD covers, let me show you this one as well. This gives you mocks. Unfortunately, these guys just went where now you have to make an account. But they do still have some mocks that you can actually download as well. Like, so, you can imagine, like, I want to mock up a can of soup. So PSD covers, not everything is free anymore, unfortunately, but they do have some on there that are free. Like this magazine right here is free, but then this one wouldn't be. So I'm a bit bummed out that this went premium, but it is also a really good resource for helping you take your design and put it in situ. And I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions with when you guys were doing anything that it felt that it was feeling hard or yeah. Okay. I think I'm off. So I guess I'm going to probably let you guys go if no one had any specific questions. I hope that presentation helped the people that it needed to help. I feel like also just if you take a look at what I shared, that was just something I did that fast. It wasn't something that I spent a super long amount of time on, but just try to think about things you could be doing to make things feel more premium. Like if you're using a font, is it the best type of font to express what it is that you're thinking? Like, does your spacing look good? Things like that are really important to consider. So I think I'm going to let you guys go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This really did help because I was able to organize everything in folders, and that's what I appreciate a lot.
I'm sure once I actually go through and can catch up, I'm just not as up to speed on the software yet, but those are all really good tricks.
Yeah. Okay. That's. And if you have any other questions, I think that there's like a number of. There's always different ways to do things in Photoshop. I was just showing you guys what works for me, and sometimes like what works in a fast environment. One thing before you go, let me show you one more thing, and I think that this is something that uh, person on white background. Again, you would want to try to find someone. You would want to try to find someone who had enough contrast. This would still be hard to do if you were doing. Let me just do screen share one more time. And I'm not going to go through and do this full. I'm not going to go through and do this full. I just want to show you guys where it is, in case anybody needs to use it. Is if you're, let me know that you guys can see me. One other thing is if you ever like, I do want to cut somebody else. I want to cut someone out from the background, but when I use the magic eraser, it just gets really hairy, literally. Like it's hard because of all the pixels. What you can do is if you go up to Window, Channels, this shows your RGB channels, your red, green, and blue. It's showing it all together because that's how you perceive color. What you do is you come and you turn them on each individually, and you try to find the darkest one. Blue looks like it's the darkest one. If you duplicate blue, hit Command L for your levels. The goal is to make it as dark as possible without having it be pixelated. You can do this where, then you come over here, you hit the burn tool, and the burn tool lets you just make things either dark or light without affecting the opposite right now. So I'm making all my midtones dark, but you can see I don't make my whites dark because it's not selecting it. Anyway, the reason is if you copy and click, I've made a mask around him, select inverse, and go back to my actual layer, and it lets you actually cut things out really easily using channels. So that could be a whole lesson in of itself. The reason I say that is if for some reason you guys need to cut something out for your files and Magic Eraser isn't working, it looks too jagged around the edge. You can try Googling how to cut things out using channels, how to use channels to make a mask, and you should find a pretty easy tutorial that lets you actually that shows you how to do it. In more detail than I did, but that's another way that you guys can cut things out. So I'm gonna let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your snow day. Keep an eye out for feedback for your sketches, and hopefully we will have class next week and there won't be another snow day. I need to check. I believe we should be on campus next week, but I'll confirm via email after tonight.
Thanks, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.